Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee with Craig, where we talk about all things Second Amendment and firearms. We talk about politics, culture, media, movies, music, you name it. If it's gun-related, we're talking about it right here on Coffee with Craig. So please take a moment, like and share this program, whether you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube. Remember to subscribe and hit the notification button so that you can get the alerts as soon as these videos go live. Also, if you're listening to us, or if you just want to listen to us, you can listen to us on Apple Podcast, Apple iTunes, Google Podcast, Spotify. All of those are available to you. All you got to do is follow the link in the description of this video to anchor.fm, and it'll show you all of the different ways you can listen and download and listen to the Coffee with Craig podcast. Also, would love to encourage you to go to fpcgear.com, fpcgear.com. Now, you guys got to know this. It's a great place to go to buy Second Amendment gear. T-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, all sorts of different things that show your support for the Second Amendment. And also, though, know that you will actually be supporting the Second Amendment, because the money that you spend there goes right back into the fight for our right to keep and bear arms. So you can support the Second Amendment, and you can look good doing it. That's fpcgear.com. All right, now that we have paid the bills, let's get down to it. Obviously, you know, the legislative sessions all over the country are going to be starting back up. No place is this more interesting, to be honest with you, than in the state of California. California is what I like to call behind enemy lines when it comes to gun rights. Unfortunately, we are in a state where legislators, many of them, seem more interested in doing things that make people feel safe, as opposed to actually making them safe. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, life in the California legislature as a pro-Second Amendment advocate, but also kind of what it's going to look like here going forward here in the state of California. And with that, we have probably one of the best advocates that the Second Amendment in California has ever had in the California State Legislature, a gentleman who's served in the State Assembly and now will be coming back to the Assembly as a member of the State Senate as its representative from the 38th District, Mr. Brian Jones. Mr. Jones, welcome to Coffee with Craig.
Good morning, Craig. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you coming on. So, you know, for the folks who don't know you, tell folks a little bit about kind of your background, both in politics and with the Second Amendment, and a little bit about what made you decide to come back to the California State Legislature.
Well, so I'll start at the beginning. As you may know, I was served on the Santee City Council from 2002 to 2010. I ran for Congress in 2008 and lost. And so in 2010, the Assembly seat opened up, and I ran for that and had some goodwill left over and some name ID left over from the congressional race 2 years earlier. And so pretty much walked into the Assembly seat in 2010. When I got elected to the Assembly, I wasn't what you would call a Second Amendment advocate at that point in time. Now, I wasn't opposed to the Second Amendment, and I wasn't opposed to firearms and self-protection and all of that. I just, at that point in time, I didn't own any firearms. My dad owned a few that, you know, I grew up shooting some .22 rifles and some .22 pistols, but I wasn't an advocate. I wasn't an aficionado. I didn't have a collection. I just knew, you know, based on my appreciation of the Constitution, that the Second Amendment was important, and that was about the extent of my motivation for the Second Amendment. After getting elected to the Assembly, and that first year wasn't too bad, but the second year and third year that I was up there, the anti-Second Amendment, I don't even know what to call them, advocates. I don't like that word, advocates.
I've called them things, and I will just tell you right now that there are many on our show who have probably called them things that you probably don't wish to refer to.
Right? No, yeah, and you know, I'm sure I've whispered some of those things under my breath as I'm discussing some of these bills in the past. But really, I think the situation in California is not so much as that they're anti-gun advocates or anti-Second Amendment. I think they're, you know, for the most part, the loudest, most effective people in restricting our Second Amendment are deceived. I think is probably the best way to put it. And so as I saw this happening up in Sacramento, discussing these bills, I mean, restrictions on firearms that I, in my wildest dreams, couldn't sit down with a blank sheet of paper and come up with as an idea, even though it's a bad idea. I couldn't even come up with these bad ideas if I tried. And so watching this happen, having some staff members that were very pro Second Amendment, and then just, recognizing that these rights were going to be taken away by our legislature is kind of what pushed me into the fray, so to speak, of the Second Amendment debate and being a Second Amendment proponent. And actually, I don't even want to say a proponent, protector at this point in time. The proponents of the Second Amendment already did their work in writing the Constitution and giving us this freedom, or not, they didn't give it to us, recognizing that we have the right to self-defense and putting that in the Constitution. So now our generation is left with protecting it, and defending it.
Well, exactly. I think each generation is left with protecting and defending it, but it's even a greater challenge now when it appears by all accounts. I mean, even Justice Thomas wrote in one of his dissents when they decided not to take up a Second Amendment case. He said, we now treat the Second Amendment as a disfavored right. In other words,
right.
Yeah, it's a right, but it's not really a right. You know what I mean?
Well, and unfortunately, Craig, over the course of the last 100 years, the anti-gun proponents have gotten away with restricting our Second Amendment rights, to the point now where these debates we're having today would have never been acceptable debates. They wouldn't have even made sense 50 years ago. But it's kind of like boiling the frog. The first thing you get passed is gun registration. And then the next thing is, the right for the police to come take those guns because they're registered and you committed a crime. And then, or maybe you didn't commit a crime and the cops can still come get them because they're registered. And then it's been a sliding slope since then, to the point now where the ideas that are being debated are so anti-Second Amendment, so anti-Constitution, so anti-founding to the country that we're really on a precipice of the Second Amendment, I think, is the finger in the dike of the floodwaters of losing our liberties in America. And the left knows that. The anti-gun folks know that. They know if they can break this, then that's the beginning of taking away all of our liberties.
Well, I think you are 100% correct. One of the things that we've found in the legislation that we've been fighting isn't even just fighting Second Amendment stuff. It's if you choose to exercise your Second Amendment rights, then other rights become suspect. Bills that prohibit advertising of firearms on state-run billboards. These red flag laws, which on the surface sound like a good idea, except that you have absolutely no due process. You lose your rights before you ever get your day in court. And by the time you get there, you're guilty till proven innocent.
And I think that's, regarding the Second Amendment, I think that's probably one of the grand debates that we'll have in the next decade, eventually working its way up to the Supreme Court, is the due process on gun rights and the ability for law enforcement to interfere and infringe those gun rights. We're kind of at the point right now where there hasn't been too many major cases of wrongfully seized firearms. Now, let me be very clear on that. There's been cases of wrongfully seized firearms, absolutely, but nothing that has been, made the big news or has been highly recognizable or notable. Once that happens, then the debate will take place on due process for firearms. And it's kind of an amazing thing to me. We've had every decade or so, it seems like America debates some aspect of the Constitution and confirms it, cleans it up, puts whatever processes in. So due process is one of those debates we've had in the past. It's just the Second Amendment's turn to go through that process, and we have to be vigilant. If we're not vigilant, we will lose this debate. If we are vigilant, we will win the debate.
Well, one other thing that I've noticed is, once again, this chipping away around the Second Amendment. Things like saying, well, okay, well, yes, you have a right to own a firearm, but you don't necessarily have a right to own a firearm of your choice. You don't have the right to sell a firearm. Great example that you dealt with, the whole banning of gun shows at Del
Right.
Mar.
Right.
Those are the sorts of things that it seems like that once again, it's not just the Second Amendment, but chipping away around or taking things from around the Second Amendment. Like, I mean, tell me how that whole discussion went dealing with the situation over there at Del Mar.
Well, let me address the chipping away issue first, because I'm glad you brought that up, because it's one of the things I was thinking about as I was preparing for today. Is right now, the Second Amendment defenders, we have been pushed into a position where we are hacking at the branches rather than chopping at the root of the problem. And the hacking at the branches is all of these superfluous laws and regulations that are coming up that, like you said, chip at the Second Amendment. And as defenders, we keep going after those regulations, laws, and proposals, and debating those one-on-one. What we really need to do is we need to get to the root of the problem, and that is the left has done a good job of brainwashing Americans into believing, and let me back up, brainwashing a certain size of the population. I think still most Americans support and appreciate the Second Amendment, and they're just not vocal about it yet. But the vocal people that are against the Second Amendment, we've got to hack at that root. And as I opened up with, some of these folks are deceived into thinking that getting rid of guns is going to make everybody safe. Well, that's been proven scientifically over and over in different counties in the United States, in different cities in the United States, in different states in the United States, and then extrapolate that into different countries around the world. It's been proven over and over that doesn't work, that doesn't make us more safe. Actually, more guns makes us more safe. So all that, to summarize that, we need to hack at the root of the brainwashing that's taking place in America right now. And we've got to come up with messaging that it is scientifically based, and we have it, politically correct, and we have it. And we just need to get organized and start educating our fellow American citizens on the value of the Second Amendment.
Well, no, I think you're precisely correct, and I think one of the challenges that you have when it comes to firearms policy is that, even in the state legislatures, there are very few people on either side of the aisle who understand firearms technology and firearms policy and how the two intersect. And so sometimes things that are written, just ideas that sound like, oh, wow, that's just a quote unquote common sense gun control or common sense law, when you actually break it down, is not very common sense, because in some cases it's practically nonsensical.
What's the amazing thing, Craig, is one of the things when I was in the legislature that I've purposed to do is expose more people to the proper care and handling of firearms. And so I when I was in the assembly, I did an annual Second Amendment celebration event out here at one of my local gun ranges, and Assemblymember Vopel has taken that up, and we'll probably work on it again now that I'm back in the legislature. But one of the things I love doing is taking, you've got, there's a spectrum of anti-gun and pro-gun, and the pro-gun people we don't have to worry about. But then you've got the middle people that are neutral. They don't understand guns. They don't understand firearms. They've never been around them, and so they're kind of, they don't really have a true north on how they feel about firearms. And then to the left of that, you've got everybody else that wants to ban them and get rid of them. Well, one of my favorite things to do is take all the people on that side of the spectrum, including legislators that have passed anti-Second Amendment laws and got them signed into law, is when they are willing, take them out to a gun range. And the only time I've been successful with the lawmakers doing this is at the CHP Academy in Sacramento, because I guess it's at a police facility, so they feel safer, which it is a very safe facility. But almost 100% of the time, it doesn't matter where they are on that spectrum, from neutral to agnostic to completely against the Second Amendment, trying to get rid of it. As soon as you expose them to firearms, let them handle them, fire them, use them, take care of them, break them down, clean them in a professional setting, nobody's ever had a bad time doing that. Not one person ever has had a bad time doing that. And almost 100%, everybody comes away from that experience with a smile on their face going, oh, I didn't know this about guns. And it's like, hello, the light bulb goes on over their head. And now, all that to say, I haven't been very successful in getting them to slow down their animosity towards the Second Amendment, but I'm at least removing the mythical demon of fireworks from their perspective.
I think in some cases what it comes down to is, and once again, and I've talked with a number of these legislators. I think in many cases what it comes down to is, it is not something that is important enough for them to stand up to members of their caucus for whom this is something important.
Right.
In some cases, it's a matter of, well, hey, this is my chance to get my name out there, and in some cases, I've seen it, and in some cases, I'm telling you, I've seen it. They really, honestly, and truly do mean well, but the problem is they start from a premise of guns are bad, and people who want a gun to have a gun is a bad thing. Nothing good can come from owning
exactly
a
firearm. Right, and that's that's why I'm saying that's the root of the problem right there. You can't change that person's mind on a policy. You can't change that person's mind on a law that's being carried through the building. You have to change that person's mind at the root of the problem, which is getting them to understand, first of all, firearms are safe when properly used, and they're almost always properly used. That the people that are in the firearm industry and culture are not bad, evil people. And then the third thing is we got to get them exposed to using the firearms, and like I said, remove that mythical demon that they have in their perception of firearms.
Yeah, that would be a really great thing if we could take the time to do that with each and every legislator, or if they were even open to doing that. I had one time I had a meeting with the chief of staff for Assemblyman. Whoa! All of a sudden, I just forgot his name. Anyway, he was a Democratic Assembly. I won't bust him out like that. But it was funny because I was talking with. They were like, "Well, okay, well, see, we want to ban these firearms, so we were hoping we could work with you, and maybe you could help us come up with a compromise." And I said, "Here's the problem: is you want to ban a firearm." I said, think about a right that to you is vitally important. Now, imagine me coming to you say, I want to eliminate that right. Maybe you can help me work on a compromise on how we can eliminate it.
Right.
But
how can we make it less painful for you to have that right removed?
Right. And that's what compromise is to them. Compromise is not, okay, I'm going to give you something, you're going to give me something. It's we're going to take from you, and we'll negotiate how much we take.
That's exactly right. And it's not a compromise. And again, that's where we've lost on our side of the argument is we've given up too much of that on, wanting to be good people and wanting to, get along and compromise. That's a foundation of American business culture, right? Is compromising on contracts, compromising on sales deals, whatever. So it's part of our nature. But as you rightly said, you can't compromise on something that they want to eliminate, because you're still, no matter where you go on that spectrum, you're giving up something and they're gaining something. It's not a compromise. It's not a true compromise because you're not gaining anything. So for example, a good compromise for me would be, you can limit the days of the hunting season if we can go back to not having to have non-lead ammo. That's a compromise where each side is getting something.
Right. You're giving and getting. And some of our folks, they're like, look, absolutely, positively, no compromise. And I get that. That's our position largely on policies. We're always going to take a position. This is the position that is consistent with the Second Amendment. Understanding though that, I honestly, I wish we were at a point with legislators where we could be debating whether or not we should compromise getting something for giving something, but
Right.
we're not even
Right.
there. We're not
No,
even
no,
at
no. We're
that.
not
We're
there.
not even at that point. It's
Yeah.
okay. How much are you going to have to give up? Speaking of giving up, we're having to give up something. Legislative session has started. They're already introducing bills. There's already a few anti-gun bills that have already been introduced. One of which is the tax on all handguns, on semi-automatic long guns. Wanted to get kind of your perspective on that particular piece of legislation.
Well, Craig, I got to be honest with you. I've been busy setting up my office and getting my staff going, and today is my grand opening for my district office. So tell me a little bit about the bill, because I haven't really sat down and studied. The filing deadline for bills isn't until the end of January, so there's going to be a lot of activity when we get back the first week. So I haven't really sat down to study specifically the new bills this year.
Well, without getting into too much detail, because I do understand, literally, you're going to have thousands of bills that you're going to have to be making some decisions on and reviewing. This one in particular was by Assemblyman Mark Levine, would, in essence, put a surcharge or a tax on all handguns, on all semi-automatic long guns and ammunition. It is... in my opinion, it is the essence of a modern day poll tax. In other words, if you're going to now tax a constitutional right, if you want to exercise it, you're now going to have to pay a tax. And
Right.
by the
right.
way, this is already on top of all the fees that you already have to pay
Yeah.
for DROS fees, background check fees, all of the fees that you have to pay to take a firearm safety exam. There's also now for ammunition, there's a background check fee.
So what's his argument? What's the fee going to pay for?
Oh, they want to use it to pay for school counselors and school resource officers.
These guys are, it's an amazing thing. The Democratic leadership right now in Sacramento are the most creative people when it comes to raising taxes and finding a way to put a fee on. Where most of your listeners are, they get up every day trying to, figure out how they're going to go to work and do the very best job they can, whether they own the business or work for somebody. Most Americans every day get up and, okay, how can I make my life better by working harder and doing more for my kids, treating my family better, and, just generally making life around me better. These guys get up every single day wondering, okay, what can I tax today? What fee can I pass under the guise of, it's going to help the children or whatever guise they come up with. And what we need to recognize is the state has plenty of money right now. There's no shortage of public safety funds for schools, even though they're going to make that argument. And all this is another infringement on our Second Amendment. And I know the author very well, and that's exactly what his goal is, to eliminate the sales of firearms, period. And then after that, take back whichever ones he can get taken back. You rightly pointed out earlier in the conversation that getting the neutral, and I'm going to say Democratic members of the legislature, now that they're in the supermajority, they run things, and there's a good hand. You know them. There's some hunters on the Democratic side of the aisle. There's some sporting clays. Not professional. Well, yeah, I guess one of the guys is actually a professional competitor. And so it's not the entire Democratic side of the aisle, but there's a 5, 10, 20% of them that are pushing this agenda, and the rest of them just go along with it. And so we've got to really start holding those folks' feet to the fire.
We found that there are about six members of the legislature some Democrats, some senators, some assembly members that actually have very, very good voting records when it comes to the Second Amendment. And I find it incredibly interesting because, and we've run into this challenge with some of your Republican colleagues. Unfortunately, well, actually, none of them that I can think of. Most of them are not your colleagues anymore. But we found that there are Republicans who are in competitive districts who've decided that they're going to vote on certain measures. They're going to vote anti-gun, and they eventually get voted out of office. On the flip side, the Democrats who decide that they're going to vote pro-gun, they get reelected. And
Right.
I always tell people,
It's a good analogy to point out to people.
Yeah, I tell them, I say, here's the thing. Here's the point: is that Second Amendment, those who oppose the Second Amendment tend not to be single issue voters. In other words, if they don't like your stance on the Second Amendment, they're not going to vote for you because of other stuff. Because if you're a Republican, they're going to find another reason to not vote for you. Yeah, but on the pro Second Amendment side, because one of the things about FPC that makes us different is we have Republicans, we have Democrats, we have Independents, we have Green Party, we have LGTB, we have ethnic minorities, we have a lot of women. I mean, we're a very eclectic group politically.
Right.
But when it comes to the Second Amendment, a lot of our folks are single issue voters, and if you vote wrong on our issue, you could find yourself there may not be enough to win an election, but there's definitely enough folks to lose an election.
Well, I think that's true, and I'm starting to see that even down here in San Diego County with the gun rights groups down here. It's a broad spectrum of the economy. It's a broad spectrum of social economic. It's a broad spectrum of political theory. The Second Amendment rightfully crosses all of those lines, because it's a basic right that the founding fathers have recognized and protected in the Constitution. So it shouldn't be a partisan issue.
No, not at all, not at all. So anyway, let us know how folks can follow the work that you're doing. I'm really looking forward to seeing you coming back to the California State Legislature. But I know that a lot of our folks are people who follow the Second Amendment. So how can they make sure to follow the work that you're doing?
Well, I'm all staffed up in the Capitol office. So anytime anybody's in the Capitol, I'm on the 4th floor. I apologize, I don't remember the office number right now because we just moved. Down in San Diego, we have 2 district offices, one in El Cajon, one in San Marcos. It's real simple. If you Google Senator Brian Jones, all of my contact information comes up. Now, if you just Google Brian Jones, you're going to get a dead Rolling Stone. So you need to Google Senator Brian Jones, and then my stuff comes up.
Senator, thank you so much. We very much appreciate you coming on. We appreciate the work that you've done and the work that you are going to be doing, and we hope that you'll keep us in mind and be willing to come back on in the future as things start to ramp up.
Great. And if your viewers want to sign up on my website to start getting updates from me, it's electbrianjones.com. Real simple. All I have to do is go and put in their email, and then they're signed up, and they'll get all of my stuff as I send it out.
Excellent. Everyone, California State Senator Brian Jones.
Thanks.
All right, folks. Well, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. We very much appreciate you guys tuning in. Please remember, as legislative sessions all across the country are starting to ramp up, so you want to make sure you're getting the word first. And where are you going to get it? You're going to get it right here on Coffee with Craig. So please make it a point. Like and share this program. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe to our Facebook page. And remember, the Firearms Policy Coalition. We are the home in the fight for civil rights. Got to use them or you're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.